Hello and welcome back to Bookish. I was tagged to do the Bad Habits Tag, the Bad Habits BookTube Tag by Alan over at Big Hard Books and Classics. He's got a really interesting new channel. He talks about a lot of really interesting books, and he has an interesting perspective on everything. So you should really go over and check out his channel. Anyway, this is the Bad Habits BookTube Tag. So I thought I'd get into the spirit. I couldn't think of anybody who had worse habits than Ernest Hemingway. He was an alcoholic. He was a womanizer. He was kind of a dick a lot of the times. He was a braggart. He was an egomaniac. Yes, he definitely had some problems, but he also, had any number of bad habits. So I thought I'd wear my Sloppy Joe's from Key West Ernest Hemingway shirt, and I thought, in the honor of the Bad Habits Tag, I'd have a drink while I did the video. I think this is my first drinking video, so I'm going to pour myself a little measure of scotch in my scotch glass, and I'll get down to business. So, the idea here is that you're supposed to pick books with characters that represent bad habits, or books that reflect bad habits that you may in fact have. So the first question is, binge drinking. You're supposed to pick a book that has an alcoholic character. For me, in my Hemingway shirt, I naturally thought of picking a Hemingway character, but instead I decided to pick what I think is one of the great substance abusing characters in all of literature, and that's Dean Moriarty from On the Road. I'm not exactly sure Dean is an alcoholic, but he drinks a lot and he takes a lot of substances, and I really like Dean as a character in the books, and as the inspiration of the Beat generation. The real Dean Moriarty was Neil Cassidy. He was an actual friend of Kerouac's and Ginsberg's, and he inspired a lot of beatnik activities and a lot of beatnik books, and you can find him as a character in lots of them. Anyway, I chose Dean Moriarty as my alcoholic character from On the Road. The second book you're supposed to pick is a book that represents biting your nails, the bad habit of biting your nails, and it's supposed to be a book that made you nervous while you were reading it. I think my choice here is a little bit unusual because I chose a nonfiction book. I chose River of Doubt by Candace Millard. River of Doubt tells the story of Teddy Roosevelt's exploration trip to find a lost river, or literally the River of Doubt, in the Amazon jungle, and he and his family get lost, and Teddy Roosevelt is gravely ill, and they're facing all the dangers of the Amazon, and the world thinks Teddy Roosevelt's actually died while exploring the Amazon. And even though I know how the book came out, because it's nonfiction, and I know Teddy Roosevelt did not die in the Amazon jungle, it made me nervous to read. I was on the edge of my seat, wondering how they were going to get out of the situation they found themselves in. And I think that's pretty remarkable for a work of nonfiction. And if you haven't ever read any of Candace Millard's books, I really think you should pick them up. I think you'd enjoy them as nonfiction works that have the ability and have kind of the tension of a novel. So that's my choice for the bad habit of biting my nails, a book that made me nervous when I read it. Let me see if some scotch will help me clear my throat. So the next question was, or the next challenge was, to pick a book that represents unhealthy eating habits. So I picked A Confederacy of Dunces because the character in this book is one of my favorite characters in all of American literature, and his name is Ignatius J. Reilly. And Ignatius Reilly is overweight. He's also intensely funny and a keen observer of the entire world and other people's flaws and foibles, but he seems blind to his own. He gets a job, even though he is, I think he has a PhD in something right now. I can't remember what it is. Even though he's intensely educated, he doesn't enjoy working. He does have to go out and get a job, and he gets a job as a hot dog vendor, one of those people who pushes around a hot dog cart I think he's in New Orleans. That's where the book is set. And instead of selling hot dogs, he eats almost all the hot dogs that he's supposed to sell, and he ends up, of course, not making money. Because this was really one of the books that I loved reading the most and enjoyed the most when I read it. So I'm a little hesitant to go back and read it and see the flaws. But Ignatius Riley is my unhealthy eating habits character. So the fourth challenge was to pick a book that you stayed up late reading. You know, the bad habit of staying up late. So the book I picked was The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, but also As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. And I picked it for a really specific reason. Number one, I'm kind of an insomniac, and so I stay up reading quite a lot. So it's hard for me to pick books that specifically met the criteria. But when I was in college, one winter break, I was home, and I was pretty much, home with just my family, and I really spent most of that time reading. And I think I read The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying back to back over the course of just a few days. And I know I stayed up really late to do that, and I really got into these novels by William Faulkner. And by the way, The Sound and the Fury remains my favorite William Faulkner novel. And so these are the books I picked to represent me in the bad habit of staying up late. The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. The next question or challenge was to pick a book that represents procrastination or the bad habit of procrastination, because you, or in this case me, end up putting off reading the book. And this is by far the king of my procrastination reads, and that's Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. This is my I'm gonna read it next book, and has been for quite some time. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit dusty because it actually lives on my bedside table so that I can pick it up and make it the book I'm going to read next. And in all honesty, I've attempted it and started it on several occasions, and on each occasion I failed. I get about 30 or 40 pages in, and then I just run out of steam and the task seems too daunting. For some reason, I just can't quite get into it. I've been assured that if I can get far enough in, that I will be hooked and I'll read it. And so I'm hoping one day that happens, but right now it's the ultimate example of my procrastination book, a book that I put off reading. That's Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco. The next category challenge was to pick a book that represents swearing, or a book with a character in it who swears a lot. And I didn't go with a book, I went with a play. And I recently, for ShakeTube, I read Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and I really became enamored of the character of Falstaff. And one of the things I love about Falstaff is that he has to be one of the most creative swearers in the history of literature. He can come up with more names and a wider variety of things to call people than any character I've ever ran into. And as a matter of fact, a lot of Falstaff's lines in both those plays are just a long string of him calling people names or swearing at people. So I chose Henry IV Part 1 and the character of Falstaff for my example of a character in a book, or in this case a play, who has the bad habit of swearing. So the next challenge was to pick a book that's like smoking, a book that you can't get enough of, something that you have to have. And so for that I went with the Aubrey Maturin novel series by Patrick O'Brian. I've read 20 of the 21 novels in this series, and for the past probably 7 or 8 years I've saved one of these books to read every single summer to kind of slow down my consumption of them, because I literally just kind of fell in love with this series and I really like the characters. And it's historical fiction, which is something that, if done really well, I like a lot. It has a lot of technical historical information in it about sailing ships and all kinds of stuff, and I really just love this series. And this is a series of books that I can't get enough of, and I'm sorry that I'm at the end of, because breaking this habit is going to be very hard for me. So the Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brian, which begins with Master and Commander here, are my example of a book that's like smoking because I can't get enough of it. The next bad habit is overspending, and you're supposed to pick a book that represents overspending. And for me, any book that I bought in a gift shop while on vacation represents overspending. And this book about Westminster Abbey called Kingdom, Power, and Glory, which I bought at the Westminster Abbey bookshop, is an example of overspending. In all honesty, I don't have any idea how much I spent on it. It does have some beautiful pictures of Westminster Abbey and all kinds of cool English kings and queens and things like that in it, which, you know, I really like, but I'm relatively sure I paid a good deal more for this than I should have because I bought it from the gift shop at Westminster Abbey, and I'm pretty sure there was a significant markup on it. Anyway, my example of a book that represents the bad habit of overspending is this book, which is, I have to tell you, there are many examples of this. This book, which I bought on vacation from a gift shop connected to the site where I went, and I'm pretty sure I spent too much money on it. So this is my book that represents overspending. Let me finish my scotch here. The next category in which you're supposed to pick a book is a book that represents lying. And what you're supposed to do is pick a book that you've lied about reading. Back in my school days in college, I effectively lied to my teachers about books that I read, and specifically, I lied about reading Jude the Obscure when I was in college. For Victober next month, I'm going to try to make myself read a Thomas Hardy novel, but I've had some bad Thomas Hardy experiences, like Jude the Obscure and The Return of the Native, which I just couldn't get through. And even though I hadn't read Jude the Obscure in college, I wrote a paper about Jude the Obscure in college, and while I didn't make an A on that paper, I passed, and that, I think, indicates that I lied fairly effectively about having read Jude the Obscure. Anyway, maybe I'll get to Thomas Hardy in Victober next month. I can't say I'm looking forward to it, though. The last bad habit in the Bad Habits BookTube tag is speeding, and that is you're supposed to pick a book that you read really fast, that you sped through. And my example of that was Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I'm not always sold on Donna Tartt as the creator of coherent and cohesive plot lines, but she is, I think, very skilled at creating characters and atmosphere and interest in what's going on in her novels, and in oftentimes a sense of suspense. And so once I got started reading A Secret History, I pretty much had to plow right through. I'm not a fast reader, as I've said in other videos. I'm a ruminative reader, where I read relatively slowly and then think about what I've read. At least that's what I like to tell myself. But this is an example of me reading a book quickly, and probably recently one of the books I've read the fastest. So there's my Bad Habits BookTube tag video. If you watch my videos regularly, which is a few people, thank you very much, I appreciate you watching. But if you watch my videos regularly and you like this tag, consider yourself tagged, and I look forward to seeing your videos about the Bad Habits BookTube tag. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching.